A 500 bottle of Chateau Margaux trembled in her hand. Across the table, the most feared man in the city, tech billionaire Arthur Vance, just finished a boastful, booming sentence. And Alice Hayes, a waitress drowning in $80,000 of student debt, heard the mistake. It was small, it was jarring, and correcting it would be career suicide. She drew a small, sharp breath. The clatter of silverware, the murmur of the city's elite, all of it seemed to fade. She opened her mouth, and with 6 simple words, she plunged the most exclusive restaurant in New York into a terrifying, suffocating silence. The Gilded Pelican was not a restaurant. It was a stage. Every night, the same play was performed, the obscenely wealthy dining on the labors of the barely surviving. Alice Hayes knew her role well. She was set dressing, speaking, Tier 3. She smiled, she anticipated, she refilled water glasses before they were half empty, and she navigated the complex, unspoken egos of her clientele with the grace of a diplomat. At 26, Alice was not where she thought she would be. She held a master's degree in English literature from Brown University, a degree that was now a gilded-edged "I told you so" from her practical-minded parents. She had dreamed of being a senior editor at a major publishing house, of finding the next great American novelist. Instead, she was polishing silverware, her mind occupied not with iambic pentameter, but with which diner at table 7 was allergic to shellfish. The $80,000 in student loans felt less like a debt and more like an anchor, dragging her deeper into this world of temporary smiles and permanent financial anxiety. Her apron was starched, her black uniform impeccable. But beneath it, Alice was worn thin. She was a human spell check, constantly correcting the badly written menus in her head, wincing at the specials board, chef's complimentary soup, and biting her tongue when diners asked for an espresso. "Heads up, Alice," hissed Mark Jennings, the manager. Mark was a man whose ambition had long outpaced his spine. He slicked his hair back with too much gel and wore cologne that arrived in the room 3 seconds before he did. "The whale is here, table 12, and he's in your section." The whale was Arthur Vance. Vance wasn't just rich, he was gravity, a man who, having founded Vance Dynamics, now owned the microchips that powered everything from satellites to smartphones. His net worth was a number with too many commas to be comprehended. He was also, notoriously, a tyrant. Stories of him firing executives for using the wrong font in a PowerPoint were legendary. He didn't just dine, he held court. "And Jennings," Alice said, her voice low as she stacked bread plates. "He's not a whale, he's a guest. He's the man who could buy this building, fire us all, and turn it into a private bowling alley by Tuesday." Mark snapped. "Do not mess this up. He likes the 98 Chateau Margaux. Don't offer him the 99, he'll know." Alice nodded, her face settling into the polite, neutral mask she wore for work. She felt the familiar knot in her stomach. It wasn't just nerves. It was the deep, burning resentment of being brilliant, qualified, and utterly invisible. She approached table 12. Arthur Vance was in full swing, his voice a baritone boom that steamrolled the restaurant's quiet ambiance. He was flanked by 3 other men in suits, so expensive they looked uncomfortable. "The board was weak," Vance was saying, gesturing with a breadstick. "They said the new foundation was a vanity project. A vanity project." So I looked at Peterson, I looked at Chang, and I said, "This deal, this entire philanthropic initiative, is a private matter. It stays between you and I." Alice froze. Her hand, holding the leather-bound wine list, tightened. The words echoed in her ears. "Between you and I." It was wrong. A simple, grating, unforgivable grammatical error. Between is a preposition. It demands an objective pronoun. Me, not I. She felt a physical itch, a vibration under her skin. She saw her 10th grade English teacher, Mrs. Gable, rapping her knuckles on a desk. Prepositions, Miss Hayes. They have objects. Vance was still talking. They don't have the vision. The only person who understands the scale of this is me. That's why I keep the decisions close. It's always just been between you and I. He'd said it again. Alice's breath caught. She looked around. The other men at the table were nodding, their faces arranged in expressions of profound agreement. Mark Jennings was hovering 20 feet away, watching her, his face pale with anxiety. Sophia Gallo, an older waitress with eyes that had seen everything, caught Alice's expression as she passed with a tray. She gave a barely perceptible shake of her head. Don't. Alice knew the rules. Rule 1. The guest is always right. Rule 2. The billionaire guest is right, even when he is factually, objectively, and painfully wrong. She just had to present the wine list. That was it. Smile. Present. Pour. Walk away. Collect the 30% tip that might cover her electric bill. Vance finally paused, taking a gulp of water. He looked up, his steel-grey eyes landing on Alice for the first time. He didn't see a person. He saw a function. "Wine," he barked. "We'll start with the 98 Margot, and bring a—" This was her moment, the gap in the conversation. Her brain was screaming. "Let it go. It doesn't matter. Your rent matters. Your loans matter. His grammar does not." But her integrity, the one part of her that hadn't been pawned to pay for her degree, buckled. She stepped forward. "Excuse me, Mr. Vance." The words were out before she could stop them. They were quiet, but in the bubble of power that surrounded Table 12, they landed like a gavel strike. Arthur Vance's head snapped up. His eyes, which had looked through her a moment before, now focused on her. It was like being examined by a hawk. "What?" he said. It wasn't a question. It was a challenge. Alice's heart was a drum against her ribs. She could feel Mark Jennings's panic radiating from across the room. She could feel the stares of the 3 suits at the table, their expressions shifting from sycophantic agreement to baffled horror. "I'm sorry, sir," Alice said, her voice miraculously steady. "I overheard you. It's between you and me." There it was. The silence that followed was not just an absence of noise. It was a physical vacuum. The nearest tables, sensing the sudden vortex of tension, fell quiet. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. The bartender paused, a cocktail shaker held motionless in his hand. Mark Jennings's face went from pale to a ghastly, bloodless white. He looked like he was about to be sick. The whole restaurant went silent. Vance's companions were statues. One of them, a younger man named Peterson, looked at Alice as if she had just pulled a live grenade from her apron. Arthur Vance himself did not move. He simply stared at her. A long, analytical, terrifying second passed. Then another. He wasn't just angry, he was dissecting her. Finally, he placed his fork down, the tink of silver on porcelain sounding like a gunshot in the dead air. "What?" he said, his voice dangerously soft. "Did you just say to me?" Alice knew she had 2 options. Apologize, grovel, claim she misspoke, and get fired, or stand her ground and get fired. She chose the latter. "You said, between you and I, sir. Twice. But between is a preposition, which means it must be followed by an objective pronoun. I is subjective. The correct phrase is between you and me." She said it clearly, like a teacher explaining a concept to a student. It was, she realized with a distant sense of horror, the most professionally suicidal act of her entire life. One of the suits let out a choked little laugh, which he quickly smothered when Vance's gaze flickered to him. Mark Jennings finally found his legs. He scurried over, his hands fluttering nervously. "Mr. Vance, sir, I am so sorry. Please forgive the interruption. Alice, what are you doing? Go, back to the kitchen. Now." He tried to shoulder her aside, bowing and scraping to Vance. "She's new, sir. Overeager. She studied English. She gets confused." Vance held up a single, large hand. Mark Jennings froze, his mouth half open. The billionaire's eyes never left Alice's. There was no rage in them now, just a cold, calculating curiosity. It was, she thought, infinitely scarier. "You studied English," he stated. "Yes, sir. At Brown." "Brown," he repeated, tasting the word. "An expensive piece of paper just to pour my wine." "It would seem so, sir," Alice said, her chin lifting. The fear was being replaced by a strange, fatalistic calm. If she was going down, she would go down standing. "And you thought," Vance continued, leaning forward, "that the most valuable contribution you could make tonight, more valuable than, say, getting the wine, was to correct my grammar in front of my associates. I apologize for the interruption, sir. It was impulsive. But, well, yes, it was incorrect." The man named Peterson visibly winced, shrinking in his seat. Vance stared at her for another 10 seconds. The silence in the restaurant was now so profound that Alice could hear the hum of the wine fridge behind the bar. He finally leaned back in his chair. The corner of his mouth twitched. It was not a smile. It was something far more unsettling. "The 98 Margot," he said, his voice returning to its normal volume. "And bring a glass for yourself." Alice blinked. "Sir, a glass. For you. Do I need to repeat myself? I find I hate repeating myself. Mr. Vance, I'm on duty. I can't drink," she stammered. "And I," he countered, "own the bank that holds the mortgage on this building. Get the glass. And the bottle. And you," he snapped at Mark Jennings, who was still hovering like a distressed ghost. "Go, polish something. You're making me nervous." Mark fled. Alice, completely bewildered, turned and walked on autopilot to the cellar. Sophia grabbed her arm as she passed the service station. "What in God's name did you do, Alice? Are you crazy?" "I think I just got fired in the weirdest way possible," Alice whispered, her hands shaking as she retrieved the dusty, priceless bottle. "Or worse," Sophia muttered, her eyes wide. "He's playing with you. Men like that don't get corrected. They get even." Alice returned to the table. Her hands were trembling so badly she was terrified she would drop the $500 bottle. She placed 5 glasses on the table, 4 for the men, and, as instructed, 1 for herself. She went through the ritual, presented the bottle to Vance, who grunted. She expertly cut the foil and eased the cork out with a soft thump. The men at the table watched her, their expressions a mix of fear and morbid curiosity. They looked like they were waiting for their host to suddenly lunge across the table. Alice poured a small tasting amount into Vance's glass. He swirled it, sniffed, and took a sip. "Adequate," he pronounced. Alice proceeded to pour for the other 3 men. Then, her hand hesitating, she poured a small amount into her own glass. She set it on the table, well away from her, and clasped her hands behind her back. "Drink," Vance commanded. "Sir, I really can't." "Drink," he said again, his voice flat. "I want to propose a toast." Defeated, Alice lifted the glass. The deep red liquid smelled of dark berries and old money. Vance raised his own glass. "To honesty," he said, his eyes locked on Alice. "A commodity so rare it's almost priceless, and so dangerous it's almost stupid." The other men quickly raised their glasses, murmuring, "To honesty." Alice took a tiny, bird-like sip. The wine was incredible, complex and smooth. It also tasted like ash. "So, Miss Hayes from Brown," Vance said, setting his glass down. "You're an expert on the English language. Tell me, what's wrong with this sentence? The Vance Foundation's primary goal are to disrupt inefficient charitable models." Alice blinked, caught off guard. The subject is goal, which is singular. The verb should be is, not are. The primary goal is to disrupt. Exactly, Vance nodded. And yet, my $30,000 a month communications director wrote that exact sentence in a press release this morning. What does that tell you? That. He was careless, sir. It tells me, Vance said, leaning in again, that he's an idiot, or he's a liar, or he's so terrified of me that his brain seizes up when he writes my name. All three are liabilities. He took a bite of his bread. "You're a waitress." "Yes, sir." "Why?" "I have significant student debt, sir. The publishing world doesn't pay well for entry-level positions. The tips here are better." It was a humiliating, blunt admission. "So you're drowning in debt, work in a job you're overqualified for, and you decide to risk it all to correct a man who could, as your terrified little manager noted, buy this building just to spite you." Why? This was the real question. Alice looked at him, the fear finally receding, replaced by a dull, defiant anger. "Because it was wrong," she said. It was wrong. It grated. You're an important man. You're talking about an important foundation, and the language was sloppy. It makes the idea seem sloppy." The table went silent again. This time, Alice had a feeling she had said something far more significant than "between you and me." Vance's face was unreadable. He picked up his pen, a thick, gold-plated instrument, and pulled his linen napkin from his lap. He scribbled something on it. For the next 10 minutes, the meal proceeded in a state of bizarre tension. Vance and his men began discussing semiconductor yields, completely ignoring Alice. She cleared plates, she refilled water. She tried to act as if the most bizarre, stressful encounter of her life wasn't happening. She hadn't been fired. She hadn't been hired. She was just in limbo. Finally, the men stood to leave. They filed out, the 3 suits avoiding her gaze. Arthur Vance was the last. He paused by the table and picked up the napkin he had written on. He didn't look at her. He just held it out. Alice took it. He then reached into his pocket, pulled out a thick wad of cash, and dropped it on the table. It wasn't a neat stack of bills. It was a chaotic pile, easily $1,000. A tip meant to both reward and insult. Then he walked out. Alice waited until the door closed. She let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for 20 minutes. She looked down at the napkin. Written in bold black ink was an address, 800 Park Avenue, 50th floor, and a time tomorrow, 9 a.m. Don't be late. And below that, 1 sentence. We have a lot of work to do. The next morning, Alice stood in the lobby of 800 Park Avenue, a gleaming steel and glass monument to Vance dynamics. Her waitress uniform was replaced by her one interview outfit, a simple black blazer and skirt that she'd owned since college. It felt woefully inadequate. The lobby was a cathedral of white marble, and the receptionist looked like she had been sculpted from ice. "Name?" the receptionist asked, not looking up. "Alice Hayes. I have a 9 a.m. meeting with Mr. Vance." The receptionist's head snapped up. Her eyes raked over Alice, instantly cataloguing the off-brand blazer and the cheap-looking, but sturdy, shoes. The judgment was palpable. "Of course," she said, her voice dripping with sudden, frosty professionalism. 50th floor. His executive assistant, Chloe Bishop, is expecting you." The elevator ride was silent and terrifyingly fast. It opened directly into a vast, minimalist office. The only things on the 50th floor were a few pieces of abstract art, a desk, and a woman who looked even more intimidating than the receptionist. "Miss Hayes." Chloe Bishop stood. She was sharp, dressed in a grey suit that probably cost more than Alice's car. "I'm Chloe. Mr. Vance is in a meeting. He'll be with you shortly. Coffee?" "No, thank you. I'm fine." Alice sat on a low, leather sofa that was probably worth a year of her rent. For 15 minutes, the only sound was the click-clack of Chloe's keyboard. Alice felt like she was being X-rayed. Finally, a door hissed open. "Send her in, Chloe," Vance's voice boomed. Alice stood, smoothed her skirt, and walked into the dragon's den. Arthur Vance's office was the size of her entire apartment. One wall was a solid pane of glass, offering a godlike view of Central Park. Vance wasn't behind his desk. He was standing by the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Miss Hayes," he said, not turning. "You're punctual. I like that. It suggests you respect other people's time, a rare trait." "Good morning, Mr. Vance." "Your manager, Mark Jennings, called me this morning, twice." Alice's stomach plummeted. "Oh." "He apologized for your inexcusable behavior. He said you were emotionally unstable and had been fired. He begged me not to hold it against the restaurant." Vance turned around. "I find groveling distasteful. It's the language of a man with nothing to offer." He walked to his desk, a massive slab of dark wood. "You, on the other hand, have something to offer. You have courage. Or, as I said last night, stupidity. In my world, they're often the same thing." He gestured to a chair. Alice sat. "I am surrounded," Vance began, "by the best educated, highest paid, most overqualified sycophants in the world. My executive team at Vance Dynamics, my board, even my lawyers. I pay them millions of dollars to tell me I'm right. They are terrified of me. And that terror, which I used to find efficient, has become a liability." He tossed a thick, bound document across the desk. It was the press release he'd mentioned. "My communications director, the one who wrote Goal R. He's been with me for 10 years. He's smart. But he's afraid. He doesn't read anymore. He just produces. He anticipates what I want to hear. And last year, that anticipation, that fear of giving me bad news, cost me $200 million on a failed acquisition. Someone knew the numbers were bad, but they were too scared to tell me my instinct was wrong." He sat down, lacing his fingers. "And then there's you. You're a waitress. You have nothing. You have negative nothing. You have $80,000 in student loan debt. Yes, I had Chloe run your background this morning. You had every reason to stay silent, every reason to grovel. And you didn't. You corrected me, in public, in front of my associates." He leaned forward. "I don't know if you're the bravest person I've ever met, or just the most reckless. Frankly, I don't care. What I care about is that you are honest. You are pathologically, self-destructively honest." I just really like grammar, sir," Alice whispered. "No," Vance said, his voice sharp. "You like precision. You like things to be correct. You said my sloppy language made my idea seem sloppy. You were right. It's the first truly intelligent thing anyone has said to me all year." He opened a drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a contract. "I'm offering you a job, Miss Hayes, not as a waitress, not even as an editor. Your title will be Executive Censor. I want you to read everything that crosses my desk, every email I send, every proposal I review, every press release, every internal memo. Your job is to find the flaws, the grammatical errors, the logical fallacies, the lazy thinking. Your job is to tell me when I'm wrong." He pushed the contract toward her. "The salary is $300,000 a year, plus a bonus, and my car will pick you up every morning. You start today." Alice stared at the paper. She saw the number. $300,000. It was an impossible figure. It was freedom. It was a joke. This isn't real," she said. "It's very real, and it's not an act of kindness. This is a business transaction. My yes men are costing me millions. I'm betting that you will save me millions." He paused. "There's a catch." "What is it?" "You will report only to me. You will sit outside my office. Chloe will hate you. My board will hate you. You will be the most unpopular person in this building. And the second, I sense you are holding back. The moment you fail to correct me because you are afraid, you're fired. Not back to the restaurant. You're just gone. Do we have a deal?" Alice looked at the contract. She thought of her tiny, cramped apartment. She thought of the ramen noodles she'd planned for dinner. She thought of the humiliation of serving men who had been in her classes at Brown. She looked up at Arthur Vance. "I have one condition," she said. Vance's eyebrows shot up. "You're negotiating. You have to stop using 'between you and I.' It's setting my teeth on edge." For the first time, Arthur Vance let out a sharp, genuine laugh. "All right, Miss Hayes, you've got a deal. Chloe, get Miss Hayes set up with security and a laptop, and get Mark Jennings at the Gilded Pelican on the phone for me." "What are you going to do?" Alice asked, her voice small. "I'm going to thank him," Vance said, a predatory glint in his eye. "He fired the most valuable employee he ever had, right into my hands. I'm going to send him a very, very expensive bottle of wine, and I'm going to make sure he knows why." Alice's new life began instantly. By noon, she had a security badge, a laptop more powerful than her television, and a desk just outside Vance's office, directly opposite Chloe Bishop. Chloe's welcome was as warm as a freezer. "Just so we're clear," Chloe said, not looking up from her screen as Alice sat down. "I've been with Mr. Vance for 8 years. I manage his schedule, his portfolio, and his life. You are a novelty. You're the grammar pet. Don't get comfortable and don't get in my way." "I don't intend to," Alice said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm just here to do the job I was hired for." "We'll see how long that lasts," Chloe sniffed. The job was, in a word, a deluge. Vance was not exaggerating. Within the first hour, Alice was CC'd on over 200 emails, memos on server acquisitions, proposals for hostile takeovers, internal reports on R&D, and of course, the schedule for the Vance Foundation's annual gala. And it was all sloppy. Just as Vance had said, the documents were riddled with corporate jargon, passive voice, logical fallacies, and yes, countless grammatical errors. It was clear that everyone was writing what they thought Vance wanted to hear, not what was true. Alice opened a document. It was a proposal for a new, synergistic AI integration. She read it, and her blood ran cold. The grammar was fine. But the numbers were a fantasy. The projections were based on a market that didn't exist. She hesitated. Her job was executive censor. Her mandate was grammar and logic. Was this in her lane? "The moment I sense you are holding back, you're fired." She took a deep breath. She opened a new email, addressed it to Vance, and attached the proposal. To Arthur Vance, from Alice Hayes. Subject, RE AI Synergy Proposal. Mr. Vance, The grammar in the attached is acceptable. However, the core premise is flawed. Page 3, Section 2. The projected 40% market capture assumes our competitors will not react. This is illogical. I've attached the latest 3 competitor analysis reports. They are already developing a similar product. Page 5, Section 4. The financial projections use a 5% risk buffer. Given the untested nature of this tech, a 20% buffer would be more accurate. As written, this isn't a business plan. It's a wish list. It's sloppy. Respectfully, E. Hayes. She hit send. Her hand was shaking. She had just, on her first day, called a senior VP's entire quarter-long project sloppy. 5 seconds later, Vance's voice bellowed from his office. "Peterson!" The man from the restaurant, the one who had cringed when Alice made the correction, came power-walking down the hall, his face ashen. He shot Alice a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. He went into Vance's office. The door closed. For 10 minutes, Alice couldn't hear anything. Then, the shouting began. It was not from Vance. It was from Peterson, a high-pitched, desperate defense. It was followed by a low, rumbling monologue from Vance. When the door opened, Peterson stumbled out. His face was pale. His tie was askew. He looked at Alice. "You," he hissed. "You're a dead woman." He stormed off. Chloe Bishop looked up from her desk, a small, cruel smile on her face. "One down. You're learning." The next few weeks were a trial by fire. Alice became the most feared person at Vance Dynamics. They called her the Red Pen. Vance's watchdog, the Waitress. She was ruthless. She had to be. She tore apart marketing campaigns, investment strategies, and internal memos. She worked 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and the terrified, exhilarating realization that she was good at this. She wasn't just checking grammar. She was a human lie detector. She found the weak points. She found the yes men who were hiding bad news. And Vance listened. He didn't always agree. They had spectacular arguments, shouting matches that left Chloe smirking. But he listened. He respected her mind. But the more valuable she became to Vance, the more isolated she became from everyone else. The executive stopped making eye contact. The cafeteria went silent when she walked in. She was the executioner, and someone was getting ready to sharpen the axe for her. The attack, when it came, was not from the vipers in the boardroom. It came from the pit she had crawled out of. Alice was in her office. Vance had given her a small, glass-walled room next to his, reviewing the preliminary plans for the Vance Foundation. It was the project he had been discussing at the restaurant. It was his passion, his legacy, and, from what Alice could see, it was a structural mess. It was all optics and keynote addresses, with very little substance on actual aid delivery. It was, she thought, the perfect example of his old mindset. Between you and I. It served his ego, not the world. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her old co-worker, Sophia. Sophia. Alice. Trouble. A reporter from the Post was just at the Gilded Pelican. He was asking about you. Alice's blood chilled. What kind of questions? Sophia. He was asking Mark Jennings about the night you confronted. Vance. Mark was... Sophia. Alice, he was giddy. He hates you. He said he was happy to set the record straight about the ungrateful, radical little brat he'd fired. Alice's hands went cold. Mark? What did he say? Sophia. I don't know. But Alice, be careful. That man is a snake. He blames you for the humiliation Vance put him through. He's been dying for a way to get back at you. Alice tried to shake it off. It was just a disgruntled ex-manager. What could he do? She found out 2 days later. The New York Post's gossip column, page 6, led with a picture of her. It was a bad one. taken from her old, defunct social media. The headline, "Vance's new grammar girl is a commie who hates the rich." The article was brutal. It was filled with quotes, all anonymous, all clearly from Mark Jennings. "She was a nightmare employee," one source said. "Always thought she was smarter than everyone, even the guests. She was obsessed with social justice and eating the rich." It was a sickness. But the killing blow was a direct screenshot of one of Alice's old Facebook posts from her sophomore year of college, a full 6 years prior. It was an angry 20-year-old's rant after a bad shift at a different, cheaper restaurant. Alice Hayes, March 2019, just spent 8 hours serving champagne to a table of finance bros who argued over who had a bigger yacht. They tipped 5%. "I hate this. I hate this city. I hate these people. One day, these rich pigs will get what's coming to them." Eat the Rich Alice felt the floor drop out from under her. It was stupid. It was immature. It was a distant memory. And now, it was on the front page of a newspaper, painted as the manifesto of Arthur Vance's new, high-paid executive. Her office phone rang. It was Chloe's extension. "Mr. Vance wants to see you," Chloe said. Her voice was positively gleeful. "Now. And he wants you to bring your things." Alice walked into Arthur Vance's office. The newspaper was spread open on his desk. He was standing at the window, just as he had on her first day. "Bring my things," Chloe had said. It was over. All of it. The job, the salary, the escape from her debt. She was going to be fired by a billionaire for the second time in a month. This time for real. "Mr. Vance," she started, her voice shaking. "Shut up," he said, not turning. "Just be quiet for a minute." The silence stretched. Alice could hear the traffic, 50 floors below. "What an absolute, unmitigated disaster," Vance said, his voice a low growl. "My phone has been ringing since 6 a.m. The board is apoplectic. They think I've hired a revolutionary. They think you're going to steal the company's secrets and give them to some anarchist blog." He turned, and his face was thunderous. "Do you have any idea the position you've put me in?" "Mr. Vance, that post was 6 years ago," Alice said, her voice small. "I was a child. I was angry and broke. I don't care," he roared, slamming his fist on the desk. The action was so sudden, Alice flinched. "I don't care if you wrote it yesterday. I don't care if you have a Che Guevara poster on your wall. What I care about is that my judgment is being questioned. My censor. My choice. And she looks like a fool, which makes me look like a fool." He was pacing now, a caged lion. "I'm surrounded by enemies, Miss Hayes. Men who want my job, my money, my company. I finally find one person who isn't afraid of me, and she gets taken out by a gossip column and a jealous restaurant manager. It's pathetic." Alice's fear, which had been paralyzing her, suddenly evaporated, replaced by the same cold, sharp anger she'd felt at the restaurant. "Then fire me," she said. Vance stopped pacing. "What did you say?" "Fire me," she repeated, her voice gaining strength. She stepped toward his desk. "If you're really the man who is furious that his judgment is being questioned, then trust your judgment. You hired me. You know who I am. You've worked with me, shouted at me, and read my reports for weeks. Am I the person in that article? Or am I the person who saved you from that catastrophic AI deal last week?" She was trembling, but she couldn't stop. "You're right. I wrote that. I was that angry, broke, 20-year-old girl. I did hate those rich pigs because they were cruel and they were careless, and they treated people like me as if we were invisible. The man I ranted about in that post, he's the man I thought you were that night at the restaurant." She took a deep breath. But you're not. You're demanding. You're terrifying. You're the most difficult man I've ever met. But you're not careless. You listen. You value precision. The man I work for now isn't a rich pig. The question is, Mr. Vance, who are you right now? Are you the man who is going to let a gossip column and a jealous restaurant manager make his decisions for him? The silence in the room was absolute. Vance stared at her, his expression unreadable. The fury in his eyes had been replaced by that same, cold, analytical stare from the restaurant. He stood there for a full minute. Alice's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. Finally, he walked back to his desk and sat down. He looked at the newspaper, then at Alice. "You're right," he said quietly. "It is pathetic. Not you. Me. Allowing this noise to distract me." He pressed the intercom. "Chloe." "Yes, Mr. Vance," came the syrupy, expectant reply. "Get our legal team on the line. I want a libel suit drawn up against the Post. I also want you to call the head of the Fiery Restaurant Group. Tell him that Mark Jennings, the manager at the Gilded Pelican, is actively leaking information about his clientele. Tell him I, personally, find that distasteful." Alice's eyes went wide. The Fiery Group owned half the high-end restaurants in the city. Mark Jennings wouldn't just be fired, he'd be blacklisted. "And Chloe," Vance continued. "Yes, sir? Cancel my 10 a.m. Miss Hayes and I have work to do, and hold all my calls. She's not to be disturbed." Chloe's reply was a clipped, furious, "Yes, sir." Vance hung up. He looked at Alice. "Don't ever, ever do that again." "Do what, sir? Stand up to you?" "Get caught," he said, a shadow of a smile playing on his lips. "Clean up your social media, for God's sake. You're not a college kid anymore. Now sit down." He pushed a thick, beautifully bound document across the desk. It was the one she'd been reviewing. "The Vance Foundation," he said. "It's a mess, isn't it?" "It's sloppy, sir," Alice said, her legs weak with relief. "I know," Vance said, his voice heavy. "It's the last project my team of yes-men designed for me. It's all about my name, my legacy. It's a monument to my ego. It's between you and I, just like I said at the restaurant. It serves me. It's useless." He leaned back. "You corrected my sentence, Miss Hayes. Now, I want you to correct my legacy." The executive censor job had been a test. This was the real job. For the next 2 weeks, Alice and Vance were in a bunker. They barricaded themselves in his office, the floor covered in financial reports, demographic studies, and architectural blueprints for the schools and clinics the foundation planned to build. Vance was relentless. He challenged Alice on every single point. "Why is this budget inefficient?" he would bark. "Because," Alice would shoot back, pointing to a line item, "you're spending 40% of the funds on awareness campaigns." "That's advertising, Mr. Vance, not aid. You're spending $10 million on a gala and $5 million on the actual program. The people you claim to want to help don't need a black tie dinner. They need clean water. The gala raises money. It's essential. It raises less than it costs when you factor in administrative bloat. It's a vanity project. It's sloppy." It was the most brutal, exhausting, and exhilarating work of her life. She wasn't just checking grammar. She was deconstructing a $500 million philanthropic entity and rebuilding it from the ground up, based on one principle: precision. She cut the fat. She slashed the PR budget, fired the consultants who were friends of the board, and rerouted the money directly to on-the-ground organizations. She rewrote the entire mission statement, changing the language from one of a billionaire's gift to one of sustainable partnership. She changed the foundation from a monument to Arthur Vance into a tool for systemic change. During this time, the office was a war zone. Executives who saw their pet projects and kickbacks disappearing tried to ambush Alice. Peterson, the man from the first day, cornered her by the elevator. "You think you've won, don't you, Waitress?" he'd sneered. "He's going to get tired of his little toy, and when he does, we'll all be here to watch you fall." "I'm not here to win, Mr. Peterson," Alice said, clutching her files. "I'm here to work. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a budget to shred. Yours specifically." She had become, she realized, as formidable as the man she worked for. She'd absorbed his armor. Finally, after 2 weeks of 20-hour days, it was done. She had a new proposal. It was 200 pages long, half the size of the original, and, Alice believed, 1,000 times stronger. She placed it on Vance's desk. He had been staring out the window, lost in thought. "It's done," she said. He picked it up. He didn't skim it. He read. He read every single word, every line item, every restructured clause. He read for 3 straight hours, while Alice sat opposite him, her nerves screaming. He closed the final page. He set the document down. He looked at her, his face completely serious. "That night at the restaurant," he said, "I was boasting. I was telling my men how this foundation was going to be my legacy, how it was all between you and I. I was wrong, on both counts." He stood up and walked over to her. Alice stood, too, thinking he was going to shake her hand. "You've done remarkable work, Miss Hayes. You've torn down my vanity project, and you've built something correct. Something precise. Something that will actually work. Thank you, Mr. Vance. That means, which is why you're fired," he said. Alice's blood turned to ice. "What?" "As my executive censor, the job is finished. The test is over. You're fired from that position, effective immediately." This was it. The real cruelty. He'd used her. He'd drained her of every idea, every bit of her expertise, and now he was— You can't be serious," she stammered. "All the fight gone." "I am," he said. "That job is beneath you. You're not an editor. You're not a censor. You're a builder." He gestured to the proposal on his desk. "I can't run this. I'm a tech mogul. I'm a brute. This requires precision. It requires integrity. It requires someone who isn't afraid to tell the most powerful person in the room that they are wrong." He smiled. It was the first, genuine, non-predatory smile she had ever seen from him. "Alice Hayes," he said, "I would like to offer you the position of Executive Director of the Vance Foundation. You will have full autonomy. You will control the 500 million. You will answer to no one but the people you are serving. Your salary is— well, we'll have Chloe draw up a contract that makes your old one look like a rounding error." Alice stared at him, speechless. She couldn't process the words. Director. "Don't look so stunned, Miss Hayes," Vance said, walking back to his window. "It's a logical progression. You corrected the sentence. You corrected the man. Now, you're going to correct the world." 6 months later, Alice Hayes stood at a simple wooden podium. She was not on a stage. She was on the same level as her audience, a deliberate choice. The room smelled of fresh paint, new carpet, and the faint ozonic scent of new computers. This was not the Gilded Pelican. This was the grand opening of the Vance Foundation Community and STEM Center in the Bronx. The room was not filled with billionaires and their entourages. It was packed with local residents, teachers, skeptical community leaders, parents holding toddlers, and a handful of journalists from local papers and 1 or 2 from the Times. These were not the bored, entitled faces she used to serve. These were engaged, hopeful, and, in some cases, rightfully critical faces. They were the people this center was built to serve. Alice, at 27, was no longer set dressing. She was the executive director. Her $80,000 in student loan debt was a paid-off memory. Her interview outfit was long retired, replaced by a simple, elegant navy blue dress that was professional, but not ostentatious. She was, in every sense, a new person, the person she was always meant to be. Her eyes scanned the crowd. He wasn't in the front row. He wasn't seeking a spotlight or a photo op. She finally found him, leaning against the back wall by the fire exit, his arms crossed over his chest. Arthur Vance looked almost small in the crowd, just another man in a suit, deliberately observing, not presiding. He caught her eye. He didn't smile. He just gave a single, sharp dip of his chin, the ultimate sign of his respect. "Proceed." Alice took a deep breath, silencing the last, tiny tremor of the waitress who was afraid of being fired. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice clear and steady, filling the room without a microphone. 6 months ago, the document that proposed this very center was, well, it was a mess. A few people chuckled. A reporter scribbled. "It was sloppy," Alice continued. "It talked a lot about legacy and branding and optics. It used a lot of impressive corporate words to say almost nothing at all. It was language designed to build a monument to a name, not a resource for a community." She paused, letting the words sink in. Language matters. Precision matters. When we use sloppy language, it's often because our thinking is sloppy. When we say we want to impact change without a precise plan, impact is just a noise we make to feel good about ourselves. It's a way to feel generous without doing the difficult, precise work of being generous. Her eyes flickered to Vance. He was watching her, unblinking, his expression intent. The original plan for this foundation was, in a manner of speaking, a grammatical error. It was conceived between him and I. This time the chuckle was more widespread. The story had become a quiet legend within the foundation. It was subjective. It was all about his feelings, his legacy. It failed to serve its object, which is you. This community. The people this work is supposed to be for. "So," she said, "we corrected it. We started over. We took the I out of the equation and focused on the you. We tore down the vanity project, and, in partnership with your community leaders, some of whom are right here, and I thank them for their brutal, necessary honesty, we built this. A place based not on sloppy sentiment, but on precise, identified needs. After-school STEM programs, adult literacy workshops, job training. This building isn't a gift. It's a tool, and it belongs to you." The applause was slow to start. Then it rolled through the room, genuine and loud. It wasn't the polite, paper-thin clapping of a boardroom. It was real. A woman in the front row, a local school principal named Mrs. Diaz, who had fought Alice tooth and nail on the curriculum details, stood up. Then others. Soon the entire room was on its feet. Alice felt a warmth spread through her chest that no $1,000 tip had ever come close to igniting. Later, as Alice was shaking hands, Mrs. Diaz grabbed her arm. "Director Hayes, I was tough on you. I thought you were just another rich suit coming uptown to feel good." "I'm glad you were, Mrs. Diaz," Alice said, gripping her hand warmly. "You made the plan better. You kept it precise." "Welcome to the neighborhood, kid," the principal said, a tough smile cracking her face. Finally, the crowd thinned. Arthur Vance emerged from the back of the room. He was alone. No Chloe. No entourage. "Director," he said. His voice was gruff, but the predatory edge that had defined him was gone. "Mr. Vance," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips. Arthur, he corrected her, his eyes glinting. We're long past the formalities, don't you think? Arthur, she agreed. Thank you for coming, and thank you for staying in the back. The press was hoping for a speech from you. It's your stage, not mine, he said. He gestured at the bustling computer lab visible through a glass wall. This is correct. It's solid. It's not a monument. It's a machine. It works. Well done, Alice. We did well, she corrected him gently. Yes, he conceded. He looked at his watch. I have a flight to Tokyo. I just wanted to be here. I was, as I told my pilot, anxiously awaiting this speech. Alice's smile widened. She couldn't help it. The old, familiar, professional itch. Arthur? What? He said, already beginning to turn. You were anxiously awaiting it? He stopped. He turned back slowly, his face settling into a mask of mock thunder. Yes, anxiously. It's a big day. I was nervous for you. Well, she said, clasping her hands, her eyes sparkling with humor. Anxious implies fear, worry, or a state of anxiety. Given that you knew I was prepared, you'd read the speech, and you had full confidence in the project. Go on, he dared her, the corner of his mouth twitching. I believe the word you were looking for, Alice said, her voice a perfect polite echo of that night at the restaurant, was eagerly. You were eagerly awaiting the speech. Arthur Vance stared at her for one long, silent beat. It was the old, terrifying glare from the gilded pelican, the one that made executives tremble. Alice didn't flinch. She just smiled. Finally, he let out a single, sharp bark of a laugh. My mistake, eagerly. He pointed a thick finger at her. You know, Director Hayes, you're fired. Alice laughed, a real easy sound. I'm afraid you can't, sir. I'm the executive director. You're just the chairman of the board. You'd have to put it to a vote, and I'm quite sure I have the votes. Is that so? He said, walking backward toward the exit. It is, she called after him. I'll see you at the quarterly meeting, Arthur. And please, read the prep materials before you arrive this time. I'll know if you don't. Vance grinned, gave her a mock salute, and disappeared out the door. Alice turned back to the room, to the sound of children in the new library arguing over a book, and got back to work. What's the real price of silence? For Alice Hayes, it would have been her future. For Arthur Vance, it would have been his legacy. This isn't just a story about grammar. It's a story about the incredible power of speaking truth, even when your voice shakes. It's about having the courage to be the one person in the room who says that's not right, and having the wisdom to be the person who hears it. So many of us see something wrong, an error, an injustice, a simple mistake, and we stay silent because we're afraid. We're afraid of losing our jobs, of being embarrassed, or of what people will think. But what if that one moment of courage is the key that unlocks everything? What do you think? Was Alice right to risk it all, or was she just lucky? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story inspired you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe for more true-life stories that will make you think. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update.